then why, as a God believer, do you only have the ability to come in and say, a historian who wrote 6 decades after this claims to have written books which are lost and claims to have met the daughters of apostles, which we cannot verify? Okay, then how can he make prophecies if he doesn't know what's going to happen in the future?
Because he can predict with great deal of accuracy generalities. That's
so
why
he doesn't know. So when he makes a prophecy, it's just a really, really good guess, and it could be wrong.
What you're saying is a third guy said that this guy was a secondhand witness to another guy. That is called hearsay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching. Most of the content on my channel is supported by generous patrons, but made available for free to the entire world. If you support that, please consider adding your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates. This clip, however, is from one of the many programs that I do on YouTube, On the Line. And if you liked it, feel free to visit, like, subscribe, and watch the Line Network live. Thank you. Anthony is a theist, pronouns are he, him, in Virginia, who says Jesus is a real person. Anthony, welcome to the show. You're on with David Fitzgerald. I will do my best not to intervene as I am not the mythicist. So go for it.
All right. Yeah. So I wanted to, first of all, can you hear my audio good?
Yes.
Yep, you're fine.
You're good.
Okay. So I do want to make the argument that Jesus was a real person. I will yield that there was a great deal of mythologizing about Jesus in the centuries after his death. So I'm not too concerned about the resurrection and miracles and things like that. But
so wait,
I do
Anthony,
think,
just to be sure, clear. So you're saying you believe in the historical Jesus, but not the resurrected Jesus?
yeah, I mean, it's not. I think that some of these miraculous stories might have been things that were invented in the early church and imposed, onto the story of a real person. So to me, Jesus was a person who, he had disciples. He taught apocalyptic, ethical, religious system, and then sent them to teach that. And
what are you basing that on? When you say these facts that you're establishing, what are they based on?
Yeah, so why do I believe that person existed? Well, there's a number of lines of evidence I would go through. I think one of the best ones is an early church historian named Papias. I think he provides some. But he was in early second. He was in the early 2nd century, and there are a number of fragments of his writings that have been preserved in quotations from other people like Eusebius and others. So it's a secondary line of transmission. But if we assume that these quotations are accurate, and I've never seen anyone suggest that they aren't, he talks a lot. He gives us a number of important historical indicators that suggest that Jesus was probably a real person. So if you want me to go through those, I can do that.
How long are we talking about? How long of a list are we talking about?
Just start with one, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So Papias says he knew the daughters of one of the apostles personally, and he knew where they lived. And he mentions the locations of their house. I can't remember which city it was, but it was a city in Asia Minor. So that is something he claimed. And this would be in a time frame. So Papias wrote about 100 years after the time of Jesus. And, if you think about 100 years back from right now, that would be about the time of someone like Woodrow Wilson or someone like, these are time frames where, people still exist who knew people who knew those people. Right. So this seems to be something that could be possible.
Well, I do talk about Papias and what he said and nailed. Off the top of my head, I'm racking my brains to remember what he said about him and what the problematic elements of them were. But I do talk about him in Nailed and Jesus Smithing in Action in great detail. Eusebius also I talk about. Eusebius is not somebody you want to put a lot of stock in. You need to take whatever he says with a grain of salt, because he is notorious among historians for the things he said, the political expediencies he applies to his writings.
He also wasn't a fan of Papias.
Say again?
He also wasn't a fan of Papias. He thought Papias was kind of...
Papias, he said, a thick-headed lunk or something like that. Something like that. A man of very low intellect. Yeah.
Here's the question from me, Anthony, even though I wasn't going to jump in. So we've got Papias, and if he's saying, hey, I knew the daughters of apostles. Okay, cool. Considering he's writing, around the turn of the century or so, that's 60 years after, give or take. So if the stories were realistic, it would make sense that he might know daughters of apostles. How does knowing the daughter of an apostle serve to verify the accounts of the apostles as, well, I mean, certainly you're not going to have an apostle to nobody. So I get that.
Right.
But saying that you know the daughters of apostles doesn't demonstrate that you did. So why couldn't God do a better job of preserving all this evidence rather than having it the case that now you have to cite someone who is citing the daughters of someone else when the person who's saying, I knew the daughters of apostles, is a biased believer trying to support the narrative? Where are the other people who knew the daughters of these apostles to confirm that, yeah, it was really annoying. My dad kept following this Jesus guy around and was never home with us? Where are those stories that are coming from non-biased sources?
And before you answer that, let me just jump in and say, when he talks about daughters of apostles, does he say which apostles and who were these apostles? Because one thing about early Christianity is in the time of Paul, they didn't have just 12 disciples. Paul never uses the word disciple ever in any context. When you ask Paul who an apostle was, he was an apostle. Apollos of Alexandria was an apostle. This married couple over here in Corinth was they were apostles. They're all believer titles. So yeah, that's not even a guarantee that you have a second degree connection to Jesus, even if he is right about them being apostles.
So to answer your question, David, he does, and I'm just going by memory. He says they're the daughters of the apostle Philip, and he says he knows where their house is. So, but to answer, and again, there's really 10 fragments that have been preserved of Papias. I can't remember which one it is. I don't have the information in front of me. I'm just going off of memory. But so Matt asked, why doesn't God preserve this information in a better way? And what I'll say about that, and actually I'll stick with Papias for a second here, is that Papias wrote an entire book called The Oracles of the Lord, where he basically quotes people who either knew Jesus or knew people who knew Jesus, and that book is lost. There was a scholar who said he found a copy of it, but then he lost it in World War II or World War I. I can't remember which one. His name was Von Harnack. And
Von Harnack, yeah.
Yeah, so I think what happened was the reason a lot of Christian documents are dated the year 200 to 300 and after that is because the early church, like you remember the mythologizing I was talking about, they changed Christianity. So they had to erase the history that came, like the early Catholics, in my opinion. They came in, people like Augustine and Athanasius and Jerome, they corrupted.
Honestly, even before those guys, honestly, we've got, for the first 150 to 250 years of Christianity, we've got nothing, not even fragments from that time.
Right. That's because we know there was a systematic destruction of early Christian documents by these individuals in the 200s and the 300s. and a lot of
What
important,
is we simply have no way of knowing whether our texts, our scriptural texts, match up what was originally said. Whether it's true or not, it's a whole other question. But we just have no way of verifying how close it is to the original. And we know for a fact ours have been interpolated. We know they've been changed. We know there are alternate variant readings that say the exact opposite of each other, depending on which faction created those scriptures. Bart Ehrman's book, Forgery and Counter-Forgery in Christianity and the Orthodox Corruption of Scripture, are just a masterclass in that. He makes a point that one of the notable things about early Christian literature is the extent to which it was forged compared to other genres of writing.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to Papias,
the reason I can bring that up is to say that we just don't have any way to verify.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that is problematic, but we can go with the information we have. I just want to stick with Papias, but there's a lot we could talk about. But like Eusebius, this book, The Oracles of the Lord, did exist up to his time, and he claims to have a copy of his own from which he's quoting. So this is around the time. I understand that, but you can't just say he was lying.
Oh, yeah, we can.
When the guy specifically advocates that lying for the Lord is acceptable, then I wonder how you can't at least suspect that he was lying.
He might be. Yeah, there's the problem. He might be lying, but he might not. So you have to prove that he was lying.
Anthony. Here's the big problem, Anthony. Are you a Christian?
Yes.
So you think there's a God, and that Jesus was divine and was God in some form?
No, I'm a Unitarian. Jesus was a prophet.
So you're not a Christian?
No, I am a Christian. I'm a Unitarian Christian.
So Christian,
there's a different kind. Yeah.
Okay. What are you basing your understanding of Jesus on? Okay, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Is Jesus as the Christ part of your beliefs?
Yes.
That's not just a prophet if they're the Christ.
Right.
The Christ is the anointed one. He's the Messiah. The Old Testament doesn't say that the Messiah would be God in human form.
Sure. Okay. Sure. You're going to throw out, I guess you just disregard the New Testament and anything about a Trinity. So cool.
There's no Trinity in the Bible.
I just said disregard the Trinity. The Trinity was an invention that was added to the Bible, which I'm well aware of. I'm pointing out that you as a Unitarian don't accept that. Here's the question. Does it matter what people believe about Jesus? Does that matter to God?
Yes, I think it does.
Then why, as a God believer, do you only have the ability to come in and say, a historian who wrote 6 decades after this claims to have written books which are lost and claims to have met the daughters of apostles, which we cannot verify? Why is that the premier evidence for Jesus existing when there's a God that exists and supposedly knows, well, I guess knows everything, or at least knows enough to make sure that that's not the best evidence? Where, if I were God and I needed the world to understand who Jesus was, why I could protect the record better than it's been protected, and I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing. So why is God so inept that he lets there be confusion, perversion? Your other excuse is that they changed Christianity, which suggests or somebody knows what the truth of Christianity is. And so now you've moved from, hey, the best evidence I'm going to present today is this second or third hand stuff, none of which we can verify in a book that's lost, to, also there's a conspiracy to destroy this evidence. Why isn't God stopping the conspiracy? Why isn't God doing what the Bible suggests he would do and preserving the scriptural record?
Well, I do think that the truth is preserved, but it's been mixed in with falsehood. But see, the thing is, it's not God's fault that it wasn't preserved. Well, hold on. Let me answer this.
Are you
let me
listening?
answer.
No, I'm sorry, Anthony. I'm sorry when you say something that absolutely ridiculous. We've got to interject. Go ahead, David.
It's just, no, you said, yes, he preserved the truth, but all this other crap got in by sorrowful mischance that his divine hands were tied to prevent from happening, is what you're saying.
It's like you're saying the government protected the water in Flint, Michigan. It just happened to also be mixed in with some really shitty water.
See, in my view, it's not God's fault. It's men have free will, and God sent the revelation.
Well, no. First of all, you don't know that we have free. Here's some questions. Did God create the universe, Anthony?
Yes.
Could he have created a different universe?
I believe so.
Did he create the universe knowing what was going to happen at every point throughout the future?
See, I'm an open theist, so I don't believe that.
Okay, then how can he make prophecies if he doesn't know what's going to happen in the future?
Because he can predict with great deal of accuracy generalities. That's
so
why
he doesn't know. So when he makes a prophecy, it's just a really, really good guess, and it could be wrong.
Good guesstimate? Is that what it is?
It's nearly 100% accurate.
How do you know that?
I would say because
how did you pull that statistic out of your ass? Did you use one hand or two?
I see here. I don't think God knows what we're going to do until we do it. But God knows our hearts so well that He can predict with nearly 100.
When He tells Abraham that I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars, is that an accurate prediction?
It seems to, it might be a little bit of a hyperbole, but
it might be a little bit of a hyperbole. But how can God guarantee that Abraham's descendants are going to be as numerous as the stars unless He is intervening to intentionally make people hook up and fuck?
Because I think like I said, he can see everyone's heart at the same time, and he can basically predict what they're going to do in certain situations in certain times, and that's why even before they're born, he can know that your great-great-granddaughter right now, your great-great-granddaughter is going to procreate. Can God know that? I don't know. That seems.
I have another question. Okay. How do you know God is this awesome guesstimator? What's that based on?
It's based on the fact that God, I believe God is omniscient for all things that currently exist.
But how do you believe? What is that belief founded upon? What evidence do you have to support that belief? That He is omniscient, that.
That's an entire. So there are other philosophical, theological reasons to believe things like that. One of them, but there is revelation that tells us that God has these characteristics and qualities. So if you don't accept those, I understand that.
How do you know the difference between revelation and just guys making shit up?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So we have to be discerning. That's where wisdom comes in.
Yeah, no. That's not. When you say discerning and wisdom, that's a lame ass cop out. What we need is evidence to make informed, reasonable positions. That's wisdom. Wisdom is following the evidence where it leads, and not just assuming that God's going to be accurate and that we'll be wise to figure out someday how. So, how can you tell how accurate God is at making predictions? Give me one prediction. Give me one prediction and tell me how you know it came from God and how you know how accurate it is. Just one.
Well, when you say the word no, I'm going to admit I can't know, but that's why faith is necessary. Because
that's not what I asked. That's not what I asked.
Let me give you an example.
That's not what I asked. Give me one prediction that God made and tell me how you know it came from God and how you know how accurate it is. Just one.
Okay, so you know the Old Testament does predict a Messiah, right?
Does it,
For
though?
the love of the God that you don't think is real, give me one example of a prediction and tell me how you know it was made by God and how you know how accurate God is. Start with the fucking prediction, then go to, I know that this was a prediction from God because then this demonstrates God's accuracy in such and such a way.
Okay, so I'm going to go with the prediction is this. The prediction is that a Messiah would be born to Israel. Okay? And that is
How do you know that
prophesied.
that's a prediction from God? Where is that? And how do you know that it's a prophecy from God?
Well, it's all throughout the Old Testament prophets.
Oh, no. It's not all throughout the Old Testament. There's you when Christians are usually bring up these predictions, there's a verse in mind for that. And when you look at that verse, it doesn't always match up to what Christians say it says. Sometimes, for like in Matthew's case, he gives you a prediction that doesn't exist and never has.
So are you? But are you saying that there was never a prophecy about a Messiah that would come to Israel?
No, that's not. That's not what we're saying.
Robert was saying. Yeah.
I'm saying give me a scripture that you think is a prophecy and how you know that prophecy comes from God. It's very exhausting having to repeat myself 3 or 4 times on a very simple thing. Give me one prophecy, chapter and verse, and how you know that prophecy came from God. That's the first part. Can you do it?
Okay. Well, honestly, I don't have the Bible in front of me, and I don't have the verses memorized. But I will say, to my recollection, there are prophecies about a Messiah that would come to Israel.
Give me
an
example.
Look, wait. Let me interfere.
You don't have to do chapter. You don't have to do chapter. You don't have to do. You don't have to do chapter and verse. I'll fucking look it up. But name one prophecy. Not an abstract. There are prophecies about a Messiah. Give me one prophecy, and then tell me how you know that came from God. Why is this so fucking hard?
Well, first of all, there's 2 questions there. I'm trying to get. So in Isaiah, there's a prophecy about a suffering servant.
Talking about the suffering. Thank you. I was just going to ask you: is that the one you're referring to, the suffering servant passage in Isaiah?
That's one of them. I know there are many others, but that's one of them.
Okay. Well, let's look at what that passage says.
How do you know? How do you know that comes from God?
So the word "know" there, I'm going to just admit I don't know, but I believe it comes from God.
I don't care what you believe. I care why you believe it. Why do you believe that this comes from God?
I believe it comes from God because it seems to have been fulfilled in the life of Christ, and that's just my faith. It's like, why am I not? I'm not a Muslim because I don't believe Muhammad was a true prophet. That's not where my faith is.
Wait. Wasn't the predictions about Muhammad fulfilled in his life, and therefore, by the same token, isn't that the same as what you're talking about?
Well, you have with Jesus Christ, you have several hundred years where there was prophecies about him, and then.
No,
I believe based on
you're asserting that, but when you pin down
what is the evidence apart from your suspicion? What is the evidence that Isaiah 53 is a prophecy about Jesus from God? Apart from you just believe it, I need evidence. What you believe is completely irrelevant to me. I need evidence that shows that Isaiah 53 is a prophecy from God about Jesus. Do you have any evidence for that?
And not to be like good cop, bad cop on you, but Matthew is asking, how do you know this thing that Isaiah said is from God? Well, I'm fixating on how do you know what Isaiah said and how do you know it was about Jesus? So I apologize that we're hitting you with 1-2 punches at the same time, but the questions still remain. And if you don't have it, your chapter and verse at your hand, I get that. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you're telling us that the suffering servant passage in Isaiah is actually about Jesus, then that's a whole other discussion. And both of those questions have nothing to do with, and do we know that's true in the first place?
Yeah. Right now, I'm just going to say that there seem to be certain things said about this Messiah that were fulfilled in the life of Christ, and Jesus claimed to be this Messiah.
No, Anthony, I'm done. I don't know why this is so difficult. If your best answer is going to be, there seem to be certain things about this that are, no. I asked for, what evidence do you have that the passage in Isaiah 53 is from God? Answer that question.
If I may jump in, Anthony, and
no.
All right.
Just answer that one question. We've complicated it with 2 or 3 things several times. How do you know that Isaiah 53 is from God?
I don't know that. I'm just going to say I don't know that, but I believe
Why
that.
do you believe that Isaiah 53 is from God?
Well, Jesus claimed to be the Messiah, and I believe that from the testimony that we can verify are true, which I haven't done that yet.
Wait. Whoa, stop. Stop. What can we verify is true? What can we verify is true in the New Testament?
I believe that the Gospels do contain true information about Jesus' life. So Mark, Matthew,
stop telling me what you believe and start telling me why you believe it. I don't give a fuck what you believe. I need to know why you believe it. And every time I try to get to the why, you dodge.
Okay,
do you have evidence to support your belief that Isaiah 53 came from God? Yes or no?
Tell me what you're going to say about Mark.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't have.
Tell us what you're going to say about Mark.
Tell us what you were going to say about Mark.
Mark was an eyewitness to this is another thing. This is what we hold on. Let me finish.
Mark was not an eyewitness.
Okay. One thing we learned from Papias is that Mark was the interpreter of Peter. So Mark would have known Peter personally, and Peter was an eyewitness. So
bingo. What you're saying is a third guy said that this guy was a secondhand witness to another guy. That is called hearsay. It's not. These are
but
guys trying to sell you a story.
No, there's no but. It's just
Yeah.
You don't get to do but.
Yeah, you can't say Mark was an eyewitness if he wasn't an eyewitness, even if he existed at all. Because Mark in the gospel, funny thing about Mark in the gospel, Mark never says, "My name is Mark. I was the secretary of Peter." He never says anything remotely like that. Nothing remotely like that ever. Same with all 4 of our gospels. None of them say, "I so-and-so am writing this. I was an eyewitness," or "I was a witness to a witness." Nothing remotely like that ever.
So now what you're saying is that a dude 60 years later identifies Mark somewhere as someone that Mark doesn't identify as, and says that he might be a witness to somebody else's witness. And in no scenario, even your best scenario of what you think happened, in no scenario was Mark an eyewitness.
Yep.
That's true. Yep. Yeah, I agree with that.
Then why did you say that Mark was an eyewitness if it's not the case?
I misspoke. Yeah, Mark was.
No, but to be fair, you've been taught that a lot. They encourage that misunderstanding. And good on you for realizing that it doesn't follow. What I was going to say was that even if Mark, quote unquote, whatever his real name was who they say he was, there's lots of things that don't make sense about his gospel if he was, in fact, the secretary of Peter. And the reason that whole factoid was invented was to give it credit that it didn't have. Same with all the other gospels.
I want to make sure that we get to this page, and then I'm going to give Anthony the last word. I'm absolutely going to give Anthony the last word, but I want to make sure we're on the same page. And that is, you believe Isaiah 53 is a prophecy about Jesus, but you don't have evidence to confirm that this was from God. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
If it wasn't a prophecy from God, what are the other options for that being well, all right, let me stop and not go down a separate track like that. Yeah. So that's the case. Then you now also acknowledge that Mark wasn't an eyewitness. Were any of the other gospels eyewitnesses in your opinion?
Good question.
Matthew may have been.
Matthew specifically says, and these things are believed to this day. He doesn't claim to be an eyewitness. He doesn't write like an eyewitness, and he certainly doesn't know the things an eyewitness would know.
I think.
Things,
we'll go ahead.
Do you have evidence to support your belief that the author of Matthew was an eyewitness? And by the way, do you think it's somebody named Matthew? Because that isn't supported either.
Yeah. So Matthew did not write Matthew as it's currently presented to us. Another thing we learned from Papias, interestingly enough, is that Matthew is supposed to have written down sayings from Jesus in Hebrew, and I believe that basically the Sermon on the Mount is probably the Greek translation of these Hebrew statements from Jesus.
That has to be a belief because we have no evidence of that or that it existed. You can talk about the.
No, we do have evidence. We do have evidence.
No. We don't have any evidence.
Evidence of what specifically? I'm tired of us talking past each other. We have evidence of what?
Papias said that Matthew wrote down sayings of Jesus in Hebrew. Now, I believe what this
is our gospel sayings of Jesus in Hebrew. It is not the secret gospel of Thomas. That's a sayings gospel. Matthew's is not. There were other gospels also included in Matthew. Some have survived, some have not. But our gospel of Matthew, not that.
I'm trying to figure out what we had evidence for. So never mind. It doesn't matter. Go ahead.
So I think
Anthony, I
think the reason the Gospel of Matthew is called Matthew is because the sayings that Papias spoke of were added to the Gospel of Mark. So it's basically the Gospel of Mark with the additional sayings of Matthew. But that's just my theory.
I'll grant you that Matthew is taking the Gospel of Mark and adding his own spin on it. That's very true. I mean, that's obvious on a reading of it. But to say that that's based on a real source that we have any veracity of, whether we could verify that or not, that's pure speculation. That's pure wishful thinking.
Okay, yeah. So, just to finish, I'll acknowledge that, the documents we have preserved are questionable, but there is reason to believe that at their foundation, they have testimony. There is evidence to support that Jesus was a real person. What can we know about him? That's debatable. But Jesus was probably, and I won't bring up new evidence, but I'll just leave it there, I guess.
All right. We promised you the last word, so I won't say anything more. But I think you'd really love to read my book, Nailed and Jesus Mything in Action. And I'd love to get your take on the evidence in the
I'll look into it. I'll look into it.
That. Good talking to you, Anthony.
You've
been a good sport.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you. It's really hard when we're in a 2-on-1 situation to not be fair. And at some points, I've got to put my foot down and be like, nope, we have to focus on one question, whether it's David's one question or my one question. We got to pick fucking one, because if there's two, then it's so wild to be like,
it's wild to see the things. It's interesting to see the things that you fixate on and the things that I fixate on, because we're approaching it from completely different angles.
That guy called in to say that Jesus was a real person, and yet they don't believe that Jesus was God. They believe that Jesus was the Messiah, but they have very particular views on a Messiah. They don't accept the Trinity. They don't accept a good chunk of what the New Testament would
And
say.
that's
So
why
this
all the
individual
Unitarians are going to hell.
this individual is picking and choosing and inventing a Christianity all on their own.
Yeah, and like every Christian has done since, exactly, regardless of denomination. Everything is cafeteria Christianity. Yep.
Believes Isaiah 53 points to Jesus, but doesn't have evidence that it's from God.
Or that even points to Jesus.
Has no way of demonstrating. Has no way of demonstrating that it's even true. Meanwhile, if I have a religion like Judaism, and there are a number of different messianic possible verses there were a lot of
absolutely
there were a lot of first century potential messiahs, because there were different Jewish groups with different beliefs about who the Messiah would be. Exactly. And the reason the bulk of Jews are still Jews is because Jesus didn't meet the model that most of those Jews thought was going to be the Messiah. He was supposed to be a conqueror.
Absolutely. But it's funny.
An actual conqueror, not a metaphoric conqueror of death in the end.
Exactly. And first century Judaism was more diverse than it has been in any other time of its history. So whatever happened in the first century to any of the myriad number of would-be messiahs that time, there was a group that said, oh yes, we predicted this all along, that this would happen. So many wannabe messiahs in that time.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that content or think you can do better than the caller, The Hang Up is live Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Central on The Line. Links below.